If you lead anything, a team, a company, even a family, you know this feeling. You say something once, and then 6 months later, you realize what people heard isn't quite the thing that you meant. Or worse, they are executing something you never actually intended. And we've been trained to think of what we make as content, but artifacts teach people what to pay attention to. Artifacts scale. They don't need the originator to keep telling the story. The story is now embodied and can travel on its own volition. Welcome to Reculture. This is a podcast about better messages that don't just tell us what to react to, but help us understand where we are. Messages that don't just pull us in or grab our attention, but point us somewhere. Because whether we are navigating a brand or a team or a family or even just the world around us, which is a lot, we are all living inside these stories, whether we've chosen them or not. And the real question is how we navigate the story we are becoming. So if you've been listening to the podcast, I've got this 7-year-old boy at home, and he came home from school one day, and like most days, I'm just doing a brief check through his folder, and this day I found this like carefully curated list made out in pencil, and it seems to be a packing list for a camping trip that him and his buddy Caleb are apparently planning. I'm not really sure where they're going or how they're going to get there, but judging by the list, they seem to have some things very responsibly figured out. Let me call out a couple of items to your attention. Fishing rod, smart. Okay, good item. Cake, obviously. Meat. I don't know, maybe in case the fishing doesn't work out. Very important item. Ketchup. If you've got young kids at home, you know how important this is, especially if there's meat involved. Music, chess. They're very cultured. And my personal favorite, plate. Can you just imagine these two boys just writing this in the middle of class? I mean, this is like the perfect encapsulation of what adventure looks like in the eyes of a 7-year-old boy. And like a lot of parents, we've got one of those memory boxes at home. You know, one of those Rubbermaid bins that just sits up high on a shelf, and it's just full of construction paper and cards your kids made throughout the years. And then you got to do this dance where you feel like an awful parent because they want everything to go in the memory box. And you're like, okay, but we've only got so much room, and I love you, but we've got like 5 finger turkeys already. Like, it was cute the first Thanksgiving, but your early stuff was great. You're starting to get a little derivative. I hate to tell you. No, you don't say that. Then there are these pieces that thankfully they instantly get fast-tracked to the memory box. And this was one of those pieces for us, because to my kid, this was just another activity. It was another game. To us, it was an artifact. It was the story left behind from childhood. It was like something we wanted to make last forever and have the pages get yellow and be legible years and years later. Whether we like it or not, we are always leaving artifacts behind. And not everything we say becomes an artifact, by the way. Like if you lead anything, a team, a company, even a family, you know this feeling. You say something once, and then 6 months later, you realize what people heard isn't quite the thing that you meant. Or worse, they are executing something you never actually intended. And that's because artifacts are more than conversations. Like, conversations move meaning. And they're more than decisions. Like, decisions aim meaning. Artifacts do something different. They do something unique. Artifacts anchor meaning. And once something actually anchors meaning, it can start to travel without you having to be there. The things that we make and fund and publish and platform, those are all things that have the ability to travel. And we've been trained to think of what we make as content, but that word is also trained us to think about output and distribution and performance, when what's really at stake is something that's actually much more older and much more human. Formation. Artifacts are formative. They tell a story. They signal what's important. And most importantly, artifacts outlive the people who make them. Artifacts are what gets left behind. They're the thing that keeps teaching us long after the conversation is done. Artifacts teach people what to pay attention to without really ever having to give specific instructions, because artifacts show, they don't tell. People don't follow what gets said. They follow what seems to matter based on what they can see. And this is really the major thing. Like I'm big on myths, right? Artifacts are the myths we tell each other brought to life in a way that people can understand and come back to. Like the businessy way to say this is artifacts scale. They don't need the originator to keep telling the story. The story is now embodied and can travel on its own volition. This is really good news, by the way, for anybody, any of us who feel exhausted at just the thought of just churning out more content. Like at some point, I just got really, really burnt out at the idea of just trying to constantly feed the content beast, the algorithm. But I got really excited at the idea of leaving behind artifacts. First of all, that just sounds cool. That sounds like going on an adventure as a kid, right? It's very Indiana Jones. It's time capsules and clues and all that stuff. But second of all, and more seriously, because I realized the goal of my work was less about making sure I was omnipresent everywhere, and really more about being legible, about being identifiable, about being memorable, about being clear. Like if I don't have those things, like going viral does not matter at all. And speaking of memorable stories, there's something I've always loved about Pinocchio. The Pinocchio myth, the Pinocchio story. Pinocchio is made carefully, intentionally, with hope. But being made doesn't make him real. Like what makes him real is that over time, the values he's been told start to show up in him. Courage, honesty, responsibility. Not because someone forced them on him, but because he slowly begins to embody them. That's what makes the story work. Like making something doesn't make it real. Publishing something doesn't make it true. A story only becomes real once it's been lived into. That's why artifacts matter. They are value embodied. They're when a story stops being something we say and an expression of who we are. There's also the story, the Velveteen Rabbit, right? My mom used to read this to me as a kid, and there's a quote a lot of us know. "Real isn't how you are made," said the skin horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen to people who break easily or have sharp edges or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except the people who don't understand." Please hear this. The artifacts that you make do not need to be perfect or polished in order for them to work. They need to be understood and loved by those who need to understand and love them. And that's usually the disconnect we feel, right? Like the more mature we get, whether we are a person or an entire organization, the story we tell ourselves gets muddy between us and others, especially downstream. And that's not because we're dishonest. It's because that intent just tends to thin out when it never hardens into something people can actually hold. Like it's usually wrong because clarity decays when it never pauses to actually take form. Creating an artifact is actually a really great way to test whether a story either survives or breaks. Like this is where meaning gets stress tested. This is where myths start to show their cracks. It's where adventure becomes believable or not. Like I see a lot of companies, for example, they're really good at testing their products constantly. But I've seen very few test the stories they're trying to tell. And the beautiful thing about living right now in the 2020s is that we have all these amazing quick ways to prototype and test this stuff we eventually want to leave behind and resonate with people. I think one of the bravest things you can do before sharing a story publicly is let it take shape inside the room first. Like at Reculture, one thing we've learned over time is when we prototype ideas internally with brands, we can see where those ideas wobble and hone them in before they're out in the public. Because if a story can't survive becoming something it was never ready to be shared in the first place. Okay, this is a very ordinary suburban dad story, but I think it fits if you'll allow me to tell it. We have this 125-year-old house in a village that used to be part of the Underground Railroad, and it was actually the headquarters of the Prohibition movement. So, like, needless to say, this place has seen a lot. It's on this really long, narrow half acre. So imagine it's like front of house and then long strip of land as the backyard. It was probably a little farm or something at some point. And we bought it, and when we bought it, it was like half the backyard was landscaped and the back half was just like trees and weeds and brush and lots of poison ivy. We heard it hadn't been touched in like 50 years. So this past year was the year I decided to go like full on suburban dad Rambo and just tackle this thing for my family and friends. I went out there with saws and shovels and ropes and axes. I mean, I literally put blood, sweat, and tears trying to make this thing inhabitable. And I found out that after getting an uncontrollable amount of poison ivy, by the way, that steroids make me super focused and also irrationally angry. So who knew? But one day towards the end of the project, we had some guys come in and grade the land with a skid steer because me operating heavy machinery on steroids, I had a moment of mental clarity and I was like, probably not the best combination. But after they were done, I'm walking around and I noticed this small little metal piece sticking out of the ground. And it couldn't have been more than like, I don't know, maybe like an inch wide. And so I went to go like dig it out with my finger. And I realized this thing is like way bigger than an inch. I had no idea what it was or how big it was, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to need more than my finger to unearth this thing. By the way, this was like the most exciting thing that happened like all week. I mean, this was a chance to play archaeologist, like to make a discovery. So I go back in the house, I get some tools, and I tell my son, I go, hey, come out with me. I made a discovery. I'm going to need some help investigating this thing. He loved that, by the way. So he got his sneaks on and he came out and he joined me. Well, about half an hour later, we had dug this thing out. What just happened?
Okay, so we found this metal thing. Actually, well, Dad found it first. And then we were investigating it. And then we dug it up. And it looks like the letter A. And it's probably from a long time ago because it has a little rip on it right here.
I still have no idea what this thing is. Looks like a big letter A. It's bigger than my son. It's about 4 feet tall by 4 feet wide. It's made out of steel. It's heavy as all get up. Some people think it might be like a trailer hitch or a part of a farm plow. I was talking to someone who knew the history of the town really well, and he actually thinks it could be a corner piece of a railroad track. Two things are for sure. It is old and it is ugly. And I desperately wanted it out of the new yard that I'd worked so hard to clear. So fast forward to a week later, I'm taking out the trash. I've got the trash bins and I've got this thing near the trash bins. And my son goes, Dad, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking out the trash. This is something I would like you to do very soon for me. This is why I had you. I'm just kidding. But he's like, you can't throw that out. And I try to reason with him because I'm not a clutter guy. I hate clutter. I hate having it around. And I'm telling him, dude, it's ugly. It's going to take up space. And then I just kind of watch his face drop. And I realize this thing isn't meaningful to him because it could be a piece of a train track or a hitch or a plow. It's meaningful to him because he enjoyed discovering it with me. Like there's a memory associated with it. So I bought myself a chiropractor visit and I carried the heavy thing back all the way into the garage. And so there it is. It's there now. It's taking up space. It's collecting dust. Probably forever. Because it embodies a myth about curiosity and adventure and time well spent together, sweating and laughing and living to tell the tale. And who knows? The irony is they'll probably bury me in the backyard while that thing is just still sitting there unearthed in the garage. Because like it or not, that thing is an artifact. And artifacts don't just communicate meaning, they carry it forward when we're no longer in the room. And the question isn't whether you're leaving artifacts behind. You are. The question is whether they're carrying the story you meant to tell. Hey, thank you for listening to Reculture. To learn more about our message studio and the work we do, go to reculture.tv. You can also follow me, CJ, on Instagram at the CJ account.